Boris Johnson, I don't know if you remember, there was a peace deal in the Ukraine war. There was a peace deal. They had a peace deal. It was in March or April of last year. Boris Johnson got on a plane, flew to Ukraine, told him, you can't do this goddamn peace. You can't do it. Because if you do it, they're going to kill you. And so, no peace deal. Even though Zelensky wanted it and Russia wanted it, and they had a peace deal. So NATO comes in, that's what this is. NATO comes in and tells Zelensky, you better not do the peace deal. He doesn't do the peace deal. It's happening again. Boris Johnson, who's now hated in his own country, he's about as popular as that guy is.
Beloved?
So it says that the former prime minister played a key role in scuttling peace talks between Ukraine and Russia early on in the conflict. I just told you about that, but now he's back at it. And what is it? He went to Texas because Republicans aren't on board for the Ukraine war anymore. So he went to Texas to try to convince Republicans to get on board with the Ukraine war again. Former Prime Minister Boris Johnson went to Texas. The Center for European Policy Analysis, CEPA, a pro-Ukrainian think tank based in Washington, decided to enlist Johnson to push Republicans to support Ukraine as more and more GOP members have questioned the policy of flooding weapons into the country with no clear goal. Two things. President Trump is for peace in Ukraine. And there's another, who's his Republican challenger? Also,
it's DeSantis?
Also for peace in Ukraine.
Is the world going topsy-turvy?
So they're like, ho, 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 whoa, whoa. Let's send Boris Johnson to Texas to talk to a bunch of Republicans to get him back on. Now let's send him to the Center for European Policy Analysis. Who do you think funds that?
The State Department.
That's exactly right.
The arms industry.
The arms industry and our government funds that think tank. That pro-war think tank. Your tax dollars. So he went to. Isn't that something? Isn't that something? You think that's just a think tank that a lot of smarty pants people get together who just want to think around each other?
We just want to have a think.
We just want to have a think together, and that's not what it is. This is a bullshit organization set up by weapons manufacturers and the United States government to push war.
It's more tank than think.
And then sending a beloved leader like Boris Johnson to tell you.
I just urge you all to stick with it, he told them.
Oh, thanks, Chris Farley.
You are backing the right horse. Ukraine is going to win. They're going to defeat Putin. Oh my! So this, is it really worth it for him to come and say that stuff? Because no one believes that. Everyone knows that. I mean, only assholes who watch MSNBC and CNN believe that. And those people, by the way, there's a lot of them in comedy.
Wait, can someone edit his face over Chris Farley trying to sell brake pads in Tommy Boy?
Yeah. While he was in Texas, he also met with George W. Bush and Governor Greg Abbott.
Oh, Greg Abbott, by the way, when I was down there, is famous for, I think he's in a wheelchair from something falling on him that he got a huge settlement.
I think a tree or something.
And then he changed the law so no one could ever get a settlement like what happened to him ever again.
He's a real scumbag.
He's like a real...
Yes. So the chief executive of CEPA, that think tank, said Boris Johnson, was enlisted because he is very much seen as the architect of the Western policy on Ukraine. That guy? Well, I expect that building to fall pretty soon, that if he's the architect.
Johnson, you're in charge of this project. It's real important.
Johnson was a staunch backer of the West proxy war with Russia during his time in office and played an integral role in helping scuttle peace talks that were being held. Yeah, so we just told you about that. In April of last year, Prime Minister Johnson, we told you about that.
I look at him like if Winston Churchill had boy band hair.
Johnson was the only prime minister for a little over 6 months after Russia launched its invasion, but he visited Kiev 3 times in that period and made the trip again after stepping down. So he's being paid by weapons manufacturers for sure to make sure this war keeps going. And
did he quit his part-time job as prime minister because it was that
it was that important to
couldn't do both. I loved it.
I gotta go full-time somewhere. I'm going full-time with the pro-war. And so let me bring in Max Blumenthal from the Gray Zone. What do you make of that? I think it seems like it's a desperation for NATO to send him to Texas. What do you think?
Yeah, and of course he's going to Texas. What do they make in Texas? They make weapons, and they have oil. And the oil industry in Texas is done, and the liquid natural gas industry is doing very well as a result of this war and blowing up the Nord Stream pipeline.
You mean freedom juice?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he's on a straight up lobbying trip for the arms industry. And so he's appealing to Republicans in Texas, but the base, the constituency of the Republican Party, the real grassroots base, is not on board. You saw Ted Nugent at a huge Trump rally saying, "I don't want my money going to some homosexual in Ukraine." They see like those old clips. They see those old clips of Zelensky wearing leather pants, like when he was doing his comedy show in Ukraine, and he's like sachet, chante, and it's all like tongue in cheek, but
that's where he drew the line.
Where my money's going.
That's where Ted Nugent draws the line at the risque comedy sketches.
Yeah. I mean, and then they send in this goofball Boris Johnson, fat guy in a little suit.
Yeah, right.
So why is he able to wield influence?
This effect.
So it's because of the people he's speaking for, right? That's what gives
exactly.
Yeah,
and it's the UK that is really pushing the red lines of this war up to the brink of nuclear confrontation.
They sent depleted uranium, right? They sent depleted uranium bombs to Ukraine. The UK did.
It's only fair because they pay the most into it.
I love how our media reported on the massive mushroom cloud over the NATO arms depot that Russia struck after those depleted uranium shells were delivered. I wonder if they were responsible for that mushroom cloud and radiation in the environment in Ukraine. In any case, if you're watching this, you got to go on Twitter to see that. But you can't see it from our media. Those were supposed to be shells for British Challenger tanks that were supposed to turn the tide of battle and have failed to do so.
Well, if only they'd been able to shoot them all over their own country, these radioactive shells.
Yeah.
Instead of blowing them up in one spot.
It's another step on the escalation ladder towards nuclear confrontation when you send radioactive shells onto the battlefield. And that's what the UK aims to do. That's why Boris Johnson went in like April 2022 to break up the negotiations, and he wasn't able to break it up with the force of his character or his erudition. It was because of who he was acting on behalf of, which was not just the British establishment, but NATO and the United States. But it's Britain taking the lead. The Brits are just psychotic when it comes to Russia. It goes back to their hatred of the Russian Empire in the Crimea, and losing epically to the Russians in one of the biggest blunders ever in the Crimean War. I mean, it goes back over a century. They are determined to crush Russia, and their concept of victory is not just retaking Crimea. It's toppling the Kremlin, installing some puppet government, and breaking Russia up into 5 balkanized pieces. They are absolutely insane. And the Republican base, the kind of Trump populists, they want nothing of that.